part of what it means to be a Christian is to believe the unbelievable, and that is that Jesus actually is God in the flesh. We're joined in the studio by Pastor Ross, and you're going to help us unpack this important topic.
Yeah, around the Christmas season, it's a wonderful time of year. People love it. There's a sense of wonder in the air. There's the lights, there's the gifts, generosity, but really underlying all that, there's a fundamental reason why Christmas is so amazing. There's this miracle of God becoming born into human form in the person of Jesus.
Okay, so let's unpack this because you've got 4 points I think are some of my favorite points, especially right now, to be talking about when it comes to Jesus. The first thing you say is this, that Jesus' life did not begin at birth. And we're referencing this passage in John chapter 1. So let me just read it real quick. It says, in the beginning, the Word, and notice it's capitalized W, capital Word, already existed. The Word was with God. The Word was God. He existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. Kind of a cryptic scripture, maybe for people who are new to this. Explain this.
Right. It talks about the Word. What or who is that? It says that this Word, whatever that is, was God from the very beginning, from eternity past, and existed long before anything was made. But then down in verse 14 identifies what they're talking about. It says the Word was Jesus. The Word became flesh, it says, and came to live among us. So in the context talking about Jesus, we know this means that Jesus, as a being, existed from the very beginning, and that he existed as God before he was born in Bethlehem, born into human race.
Okay, and so I know some people watching this video who are maybe new to this concept say, okay, well, so wait, so Jesus was a God too? So Christianity has more than one God? And so this is the second point we bring up about this, is that Jesus claimed that he was one with God, not that he was a separate God, but that he was one with God. What do you mean?
Right, well, here's the thing, is so remember that the writers of the Bible who are recording this, John and others, they're from this Hebrew Jewish tradition of radical monotheism. So the whole Old Testament talks about one God, one God, one God, one God, and yet they're starting to say, well, wow, there's this other person who's also God, and so they're not saying that there's two gods, because that would break their monotheistic understanding of the Scripture. They're saying that there's two persons who both reflect this one God, this one being. So that Jesus, the reason that they came to to that understanding that doesn't seem quite monotheistic, although it is because of the claims that Jesus made and how he backed up his claims with his character. They had observed his character, they'd heard his claims. He claimed to be one with God. Okay, so in John chapter 10, this whole crowd of Jewish leaders and everybody in the city, in the middle of everybody, he says, I and the Father are one. And so he didn't qualify that in any way. He didn't say we're one in purpose, or we have one will, or we are like really, really close. He said we're just one. Right. So he's talking about, in very essence, that Jesus has this deep fundamental unity with God the Father.
Yeah, and those of you watching at home, if you're like, whoa, this is blowing my mind. Well, obviously, we're talking about what's related to this concept of the Trinity. If you want to get more into the Trinity, we've got some resources on Pursue God about that. Just go check out Trinity, put Trinity up in the search bar. You'll find all kinds of great stuff. But we need to move on to the next thing, because I think this also is going to blow some people's minds. Your next point is that Jesus claimed that he existed as God forever. So we're talking about a kind of a corollary to this idea that Jesus is actually God. He's not God Jr., and then that means he's always been God, right? He's existed as God forever. So even before he took on flesh, right? He actually was already God.
He was already God. And so Jesus is talking to religious leaders of Judaism, trying to show them how all of the Old Testament scriptures pointed forward to him, how really he's talked about throughout all the scriptures, and they're not getting it. And so he challenges them, and what he says in John chapter 8 is, Jesus answered them, I tell you the truth, before Abraham was even born, I am. Okay, there's two things going on there. Okay, Abraham lived like 2,000 years before Jesus. And he says, before he was even born, I existed. Okay, like what? But even more than that, by using the phraseology, he says, before Abraham was even born, I am. He didn't just say I was or I existed. He says I am.
Right.
What's significant about that is that that's the name by which God identified himself when he appeared to Moses. He appeared to Moses at the burning bush, and he says, tell him I am has sent you to them. And so Jesus is not only talking about existing in eternity past, he's talking about existing as the very being who appeared to Abraham, who appeared to Moses, the fathers of the Jewish nation. And so that even ratchets up the claim even more fully.
And the text proves it because they wanted to stone him for
Right.
statements like that, right?
Right.
So it's not like Jesus like, whoa, wait, you misunderstood. I didn't mean to claim that I was God.
Right.
He never cleared it up because he did exactly mean to claim that. It's one of my favorite verses when we're talking about this topic.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so one more thing then, and again, this is related, is that Jesus claimed to have all of the authority of God. And we see this in a lot of places, but in
Right.
Matthew 28, he says, hey, I've received all authority. God has given me all authority in heaven and on earth. Then he gave him the Great Commission, right? So
Right.
what does this mean that Jesus had all the authority of God?
Well, if you think about authority, God has all authority by virtue of his he made everything. He owns everything.
John chapter 1,
Right,
Just
exactly.
Like we saw.
And so you think, well, how can any other being have all authority in heaven and on earth? And if that being isn't God. And then Jesus demonstrated in his earthly life, he demonstrated authority over demons by, he cast them out and they fled. Authority over illness, because he said, be healed, and people were healed. Authority over nature, he calmed the storm and it stopped. And so Jesus demonstrated this divine authority in everything that he did. And so, to say that I'm God and then to show it by showing that same divine authority, that's a pretty significant claim.
Yeah, that's good. Well, these are great. This is just 4 things that we know about Jesus, but I think these are really fundamental. So I hope you would check out the questions below and dig in more on this topic about who is Jesus, and Jesus is God.